So it's 5 o'clock Sunday morning, and it's just the right time to be whinging about Israel. Um, whinge about Israel o'clock. So there's something that I think that is spoken about in the Western media, and it's never challenged. And these euphemisms, I call it a zoo of euphemisms, that actually help mask the real nature of the conflict, and they are Jewish democracy and the peace process. And I just wanted to scratch the surface of them and try and investigate why is it that pundits in the West never actually challenge these things. When we would always challenge what Hamas is saying with a fine comb, what they're saying in Arabic on their websites. But even though we have the Israelis always telling us what they're doing, why do we need Western pundits? Why do we need Douglas Murray to interpret for us what's going on over there? That it's a death cult of Muslims, and the Israelis are telling us all the time what they're up to. The death cult story is just for Europeans, so they can go to bed at night and just forget about what's going on. Um, so I just want to say, why am I so focused on Israel, though? I think it's a good thing to focus on and think about in relation to the Israel conflict is how people reacted when the Rohingya massacres were occurring and the ethnic cleansing of Rohingya was going on, which is dreadful. And there was nobody tweeting about that. There was nobody demonstrating about that because our governments were not involved in that. And so that's the reason we are involved in Israel, and that's why we're angry about it. I am, and lots of other people. But another parallel with the Rohingya is quite interesting because the problem with the Rohingya, they lived with the Burmese people for so long. Well, they were Burmese as well. Burma is like a patchwork, and Rohingya are part of that patchwork. The problem is the Rohingya were an underclass, so they had no power in that region. They were just like farmers, and collectively they were just a subcaste, a lower caste, I'd say. But when democracy comes along, it empowers the numbers of people, not your status. It gives equal status to people. So democracy is very dangerous to existing power structures, and that's where the other kind of the ruling classes in that region had to get rid of the Rohingya, because as soon as you get a number of people voting equally in a democracy, then they can appropriate resources accordingly, as you would do. If there's more Rohingya in a region, then they will appropriate some of the resources politically, and that was unacceptable, so they had to get rid of them. And that's a similar parallel with the Israel-Palestine thing. The Israelis have to have a Jewish democracy because they want to actually run the country according to and the land use and the migration and everything. I don't want it controlled by people that could be non-Jewish. Well, what if the Palestinians have a voting bloc and they say, well, we're not going to have migration from for every one Jew that comes in, we want a Palestinian to come in as well. That's unacceptable. So you have to manage the numbers of people that are not Jewish inside that country to be a Jewish democracy, and that is violence. You cannot do that without violence. So when people quite calmly just use that word Jewish democracy on the news stations and on those sofas on the in front of newscasters and say, oh, Jewish democracy is that's all we're looking for. It sounds like an enlightenment, rational, decent thing, but it's actually violence is baked into that cake, right down to the finest level. Um, and these are the kind of things that make me angry. And the other thing is the peace process. The peace process is never about the sovereign rights of Palestinians, because that's never on the card for the same reason as I explained earlier. They can't have sovereign rights. They have to have a subset of them, and the peace process is basically about them accepting that. And violence is used to crush them until they will come to the table and say, okay, just give me a desk and a hat and let me do bin collections, and you have the airspace, you have ultimate land sovereignty, you have mineral rights, and we'll just look after the cleaning of the roads and you do everything else. A kind of infantilized version of sovereignty, not even sovereignty, of just rights. Now, obviously, some people understand this when it comes to Ukrainians, but completely lost when it comes to Palestinians. They just don't understand that this concept. is something that the Palestinians might be fighting for. And so those are the two reasons why I can't stand the Israel-Palestine thing, is the euphemisms that are deployed in support of Israel quite openly, calmly, by intelligent people, and as if it's quite normal. But there's violence is baked deep into the cake of these things, and that's why the violence will continue, because they're not actually confronted. People aren't told to stop. Hey, what does this mean? What are the consequences of these concepts that you're talking about? And that's why I'm here Sunday morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, moaning and complaining, because uh, it's something that we're involved in, and also there's actually another direct connection, and that is that, like, my parents are migrants, and okay, he was part of the British Empire and stuff, and there were connections. My dad worked with British people in Pakistan, and so he had a connection to. He understood. He liked British people, because he'd worked with them. Even my, I think my great grandfather used to entertain British people in rural India at the time. He had knives and forks on the wall just for the British visitors who would come. And so there was a connection. But now we're getting migrant flows that are just uncontrolled because of war. And one of them is like a rim of chaos around Europe now. And I blame the Americans for that, really. They're just opportunistically looking for kind of ways to turn over the region for these people that have been unpopular with American foreign policy for so long. And it does overlap a lot with what Israel wants as well. Israel wants people to recognize the country, so it's smashing up the little countries and just seeing who can come forward and actually recognize Israel. And these are causing migrant waves, and they're just flying into the West. Everybody wants to live in a Western style governed nation. Everybody does. But the Western nations cannot allow people abroad to live in those kind of nations, because we want to be prioritized in terms of some of their foreign policy. I'll give an example: Iran. Iran can be what it wants to be, but it cannot have its own foreign policy. It cannot have its own domestic policy. You can't control the oil. You can't have this foreign policy, and we will always try and topple the Democrat, topple the Shah, topple Khomeini. I mean, do you not see a kind of a pattern there? And the next person who comes along in Iran is either going to be like the Shah, the grandson of the Shah, wherever he is, and he's already promised to follow the foreign policy because he knows what the West is looking for. It's not looking for democracy, because when the Shah of Iran comes in, he's going to actually have to use violence to actually to control Iran, because a lot of people are not going to buy into his Persian nationalism. Enough people are not going to buy into the Persian nationalism of the Shah, like they didn't buy into it from his dad. So he will use violence, and the West will just look away because he is going to follow Western foreign policy. And if they have democracy and somebody else comes along and he doesn't follow foreign policy, then we'll just probably economically sanction the country again. And the pattern continues, because that's how it works. Okay, Mom, please. So that's how the pattern works. And then we're going to get these migration flows into Europe, and then it's the Israelis telling us it's all to do with death cults, and the Muslims are like that. But how's this? Why did these death cults just come about in the last 70 years? Where were they in the last 1500 years? When you have all these kind of different denominations and sects and religions within Muslim countries, regions that survived 1500 years, then all of a sudden in the last 70 years there's a death cult? Douglas Murray thinks he knows the answer, and if you feel this way, then you're just totally bonkers.